Welcome back, my fellow darkness dwellers. Tonight, we venture into the echoing silence of deserted museums, where the dust and shadows hold secrets more terrifying than any exhibit. These forgotten halls, once brimming with life and learning, now whisper tales of those who linger beyond the veil. Turn down your lights, gather close, and prepare to be drawn into the chilling world of ghostly apparitions. Tonight we explore 3 encounters, 3 moments of terror that prove some things refuse to stay buried. Our first story takes us deep into the American heartland, a town forgotten by time and choked by sprawling cornfields. It's here we find the crumbling edifice of the old Blackwood Historical Society, a once proud museum reduced to a decaying monument of the town's past. Now, only the wind whistling through broken windows and the scuttling of rats break the silence. Except, of course, for James, the lone night guard tasked with guarding this mausoleum of memories. James, a man hardened by years of solitary nights and graveyard shifts, never believed the whispers, dismissed the townsfolk's tales of cold spots and phantom footsteps echoing in the exhibits, until one night, that is. It was a night like any other, the moon a pale sliver, barely piercing the darkness that clung to the museum like a shroud. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of decay and dust, a familiar scent in this forgotten place. James, seated at his usual post by the front desk, lazily flipped through a magazine, the only sound the rhythmic ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Suddenly the air grew cold. The hairs on James's neck prickled as a wave of icy air washed over him, so intense it felt like a physical presence. He slowly lowered his magazine, his gaze sweeping over the darkened lobby, his gut twisting with a primal fear he'd never known. He could hear it now, a faint humming coming from the depths of the museum, growing louder, closer. It was a mournful sound, filled with an unspeakable sadness that sent chills down his spine. Gripped by a fear he couldn't explain, James slowly rose from his chair, his hand instinctively reaching for the heavy maglite on his belt. The humming intensified, vibrating in his bones, sending a tremor through the floor beneath his feet. He knew he should stay put, call for backup, but an invisible force drew him forward, deeper into the darkened corridors of the museum. He passed by glass displays filled with dusty relics of a bygone era, each casting eerie shadows in the faint moonlight. Our next tale takes us to the urban decay of Detroit, where the once grand Cranbrook Museum stands as a skeletal reminder of the city's opulent past. Abandoned and left to decay, it has become a haven for those seeking glimpses into a forgotten time, a playground for urban explorers. It was here, amidst the crumbling architecture and faded grandeur, that a group of friends stumbled upon something far more sinister than they could have ever imagined. The group, led by the thrill-seeking and tech-savvy Mark, had made a name for themselves, documenting their explorations of Detroit's abandoned landmarks. Armed with headlamps, cameras, and a healthy dose of bravado, they ventured into the derelict museum, their footsteps echoing through the cavernous halls, their voices bouncing off the walls adorned with peeling paint and faded murals. The air hung heavy with the smell of mildew and decay, the only light emanating from their headlamps, casting eerie shadows that danced and twisted along the museum's decaying splendor. They documented everything, from the crumbling exhibits to the faded grandeur of the once magnificent ballroom, their cameras capturing the haunting beauty of a forgotten era. As they delved deeper into the heart of the museum, Mark, always seeking the perfect shot, wandered off from the group, drawn by an intuition that whispered of a hidden gem within the dilapidated walls. He found himself in a room tucked away from the main corridors, a room seemingly untouched by the ravages of time. The air here felt different, heavier, as if an unseen presence had settled upon the room. Dust-covered display cases lined the walls, each containing artifacts from a bygone era. Intrigued, Mark raised his camera, his finger hovering over the record button, eager to capture the untouched beauty of the forgotten exhibit. As his camera's lens focused on the display case directly in front of him, his blood ran cold. Staring back at him from behind the dusty glass was a face. It was the face of a young boy, his eyes wide with terror, his mouth contorted in a silent scream. Mark's breath hitched in his throat, his finger instinctively pressing down on the record button as a wave of icy fear washed over him. He quickly scanned the rest of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. The room was empty, devoid of any logical explanation for the ghostly face in the display case. Panic welled up inside him, threatening to overwhelm his senses. He stumbled back, his eyes fixated on the horrifying image captured by his camera. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted, the air growing thick and oppressive. The hairs on the back of Mark's neck stood on end as he felt a presence behind him, a feeling of dread so profound it threatened to consume him. He slowly turned, his camera still rolling, his finger trembling on the record button, capturing every terrifying second. Standing there, bathed in the eerie glow of his headlamp, was the spectral figure of a young boy. Chapter 3. The Curator's Terror. Our final tale leads us to the hallowed halls of the Louvre Museum in Paris, a place where art and history intertwine, where masterpieces from across the ages stand as testaments to human creativity. But beneath the surface of this cultural beacon, hidden within its vast corridors and behind closed doors, lies a darkness, a history whispered in hushed tones by the museum's staff. It is here, in the heart of this iconic institution, that we meet Sophie, a young art historian entrusted with the preservation of some of the museum's most prized possessions. Sophie, a woman of logic and reason, dismissed the hushed whispers of haunted hallways and restless spirits as nothing more than fanciful tales spun by imaginative security guards and overworked staff. She found solace in the tangible, in the brushstrokes of masters and the sculpted curves of ancient statues. But her skepticism, her unwavering belief in the rationale, would be put to the test one fateful night. It was late, well past midnight, the hour when the museum shed its skin of bustling crowds and hummed with an eerie silence. Sophie, engrossed in her research, sat alone in her dimly lit office, surrounded by stacks of ancient texts and faded photographs. The only sound was the gentle scratching of her pen against parchment, as she painstakingly deciphered the history etched upon the aged documents. Lost in her work, she didn't notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the sudden drop in temperature that sent a chill down her spine. She didn't notice the faint scent of lavender that wafted through the air, a scent so out of place in the sterile environment of her office. She noticed nothing until it was too late. A cold hand gently caressed her neck, sending a jolt of electricity through her body. She gasped, dropping her pen, the ancient text before her blurring as her heart leaped into her throat. Terror, primal and immediate, seized her as she slowly turned, her mind struggling to reconcile the impossible sensation with the rational world she clung to. Standing there, bathed in the pale moonlight streaming through the window, was a figure that seemed to materialize from the shadows themselves. It was the figure of a woman, tall and regal, her form shimmering as if woven from moonlight and shadows. She was adorned in a flowing gown of deepest black, her face partially obscured by a delicate lace veil that did little to hide the sorrow etched upon her ethereal features. Sophie's breath caught in her throat, her mind rebelling against the impossible sight before her. Her eyes, wide with terror, met the spectral woman's gaze, and in that instant, a wave of despair, of unimaginable sadness washed over her. It was a feeling so profound, so overwhelming, that Sophie felt her own knees buckle beneath the weight of it. The spectral woman glided closer, her movements fluid and silent, her feet not seeming to touch the ground. As she moved, she spoke, her voice a mournful whisper that seemed to seep into Sophie's very core, bypassing her ears and resonating deep within her soul. The Louvre, the Cranbrook, the Blackwood Historical Society. Just a few of the countless museums that stand as silent sentinels, guarding not only the treasures within their walls, but also the echoes of lives lived and lost. As we've explored tonight, these echoes sometimes manifest in ways that defy explanation, reminding us that the veil between our world and the next can be thin, fragile, and easily pierced. Thank you for joining me on this chilling exploration of ghostly apparitions in deserted museums. Remember, the next time you wander through the hallowed halls of a museum, be mindful of the stories whispered beneath the surface, the echoes of the past that linger in the stillness. Until next time, sleep tight and keep your eyes open for the unexplained.